Good afternoon. This is the webinar on evaluating social media impact in National Science Foundation's Include projects. It grew out of a multi-scale evaluation in STEM education conference proposal. I am your moderator, and my name is Louis Gross. I am the director of the National Institute of Mathematical and Biological Synthesis, and I'm a professor here at the University of Tennessee in Ecology and Evolutionary Biology and Mathematics. And it's my pleasure to be the moderator for this series of webinars. This presentation is designed for a mixture of individuals, including those who have awards from the National Science Foundation Includes program. And though our principal audience are the investigators associated with those projects, it's also for those planning to apply for either the current Dear Colleague letter or the calls for alliances. The information that we're presenting here could also be of interest to any person in STEM education wishing to learn more about evaluating social media use and how it connects to program evaluation. This is your basic Zoom webinar screen that you have in front of you. If you have any questions or comments, you can click on the chat button, which is highlighted at the top in red. That will open a chat window off to the side, and you can then decide whether the question should be visible to all participants or just to and you then just simply type your question at the bottom where it says type here, and your messages will appear in the chat window. The webinar will last about 45 minutes, and then we'll address any questions and comments at the end that you sent to us through chat. But I'll warn you, there will be some time to chat in the middle of this presentation as well, and we would like you to feel free to do so. Anytime. I'll be moderating the chat window as we go through. We have two superb individuals who are the presenters today. They are outstanding experts in the topic of this webinar. Pam Bishop is the director of the National Institute for STEM Evaluation and Research, which we call NISER. She oversees the external evaluation of a wide array of post-secondary STEM education and research projects, including many that are focused on broadening participation. She's also the Associate Director for STEM Evaluation here at the National Institute for Mathematical and Biological Synthesis. She has developed for us a center scale model for evaluating the processes and impacts of both the research and the education and outreach activities here at our center. Sandra LeRae is an evaluation associate with NISER, the National Institute for STEM Evaluation and Research. She has an extensive background in K-12 educational evaluation with a focus on STEM programs. She served as a STEM education evaluator since 1999, works closely with Pam and the other staff here at NISER to collect both quantitative and qualitative data to formatively and summatively evaluate the wide array of programs that are in the portfolio of evaluation. So it's my very great pleasure to introduce Pam Bishop, who will proceed with the next set.
Thank you, Lou, and thank you all for being here with us today. We're excited to have the opportunity to talk with you about evaluating social media impacts in broadening participation programs like the NSF Includes program, with the hope that you can take this information and apply it to your STEM education projects. So I'll quickly go over our agenda today, and while most of you may be familiar with NSF Includes, we're going to start with a quick overview for those of you who are new or perhaps need a quick refresher. So we'll cover the basics of collaborative infrastructure, which is the foundation upon which the NSF Includes program is built also. Then we'll move on to the social media evaluation piece of the webinar, where Sandra is going to walk us through a process to plan and measure the value of social media in your projects. Her 3V approach is simple and easy to adapt to any existing or future project plans. Sandra's going to use a case study example of the 3V approach also, and it'll give you an opportunity to think about how you might apply this to another example program. and then she'll briefly discuss the logic of social media evaluation. At the end of the presentation, we're going to take some time to respond to your questions and comments. And finally, we'll end by providing you with information about where you can learn more. So let's get started by providing a quick overview of the NSF Includes program. Include stands for the inclusion across the nation of communities of learners of underrepresented discoverers in engineering and science. It's a comprehensive national initiative designed to enhance U.S. leadership in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM as we most of us know it, and looking at discoveries and innovations focused on NSF's commitment to diversity, inclusion, and broadening participation in these fields. Includes is interested in promoting novel approaches to broadening participation by supporting the building of collaborative infrastructures that will bring people and organizations together who might be working on similar problems but from different angles. We're going to talk about what collaborative infrastructure looks like in just a moment. Includes has three essential components. First, design and development launch pilots, or DDLPs, are seed projects meant to lay the foundation for scaling up into broader partnerships. There are currently 70 DDLPs funded through the program, each with an aim to broaden participation in a STEM field or fields through experimenting with various change strategies. The hub will be the backbone of support for the program, serving to coordinate communication, alignment of activities, and to promote the vision and strategy of the program. Hub solicitations were accepted in November 2017, and the award is expected to be announced in the next few months. Finally, the third component will be the alliances. Program solicitation, which is 18-529 for those of you who are interested, is currently active with a due date of April 4th, 2018. These projects are going to build on the activities of the DDLPs to leverage the strategies that have shown promise to develop multi-stakeholder partnerships with an aim to build a network based on the foundation of collaborative infrastructure. So what do we mean by collaborative infrastructure? The NSF National Network is designed to foster collaborative infrastructure by promoting these 5 elements: vision, partnerships, goals and metrics, leadership and communication, and the potential for expansion, impact, and scale. Now, I'm going to use the definitions of these 5 areas provided by the NSF Includes program officers because I want the message to be consistent across all communication platforms about Includes. So every Includes project and also the NSF Includes National Network engage in a broad community with a shared vision of the importance and power of diversity for scientific innovation. Partnerships and networks are at the heart of the NSF Includes National Network, and through the Coordination Hub, alliances, and the design and development launch pilots, NSF hopes to provide a platform for partnerships and collaborative action. Partnerships and networks will operate with shared goals and metrics that allow for robust data that facilitate data-based decision-making. The Includes program is also designed to build capacity for leadership among organizations and individuals to create opportunities in STEM education careers. Finally, collaborative infrastructure should lead to more partners joining the movement, more connections being made, and a chance for these collaborations to lead to change on a broader scale. So how this fits into what we're going to discuss today is that one aspect of a successful collaborative infrastructure could be developing and maintaining an effective social media component in your project.
So why would we want to talk about social media and evaluation? Pam shared some of the basics of NSF Includes, so let's talk about why we might want to include social media in these broadening participation projects in STEM. So why we would talk about social media. We could say that grant-funded programs have a social media component, and of course, we might also answer that question by saying many people in the US use social media. In fact, this chart shows a 2015 survey from the Pew Research Center, and it showed that 90% of Americans between the ages of 19 and 29 use social media, nearly 80% of Americans between the ages of 30 and 49, and over 50% of Americans between the ages of 50 and 64 use social media. Nearly 40% of Americans older than 65 are using social media. And that's really the area that I find most interesting. If you look at the bottom green line on the graph, you'll see that's the group that's making the greatest growth in social media usage. So you might say, well, that's really great, but not really surprising. Or you might be thinking, so what? Many people are using social media. Or maybe as long as I'm out there posting things about my project on every single social media platform, I'll increase communication and I'll increase knowledge about my program. But that's not necessarily effective. It's important to think about the changing way people are using social media. So here is a graph from a very recent publication from the Pew Research Center. This came out in August of 2017. And what's interesting here is it says that 2/3 of US adults get their news from social media. And if you take a look at the difference between 2016 and 2017, you'll see it went from 62% to 67%. And if you look at the changes in just 1 year by social media platforms, you can get a closer look at which pathways are growing the fastest. Facebook, for example, increased from 45% to 66% from 2016 to 2017. Twitter made a smaller jump from 11% to 15%, and YouTube made the largest jump. It went from 18 to 58%. In fact, YouTube has become the second most used search engine behind Google. Now, we could speculate or even joke about why people are going to social media for news, but that's not the point for our talk today. We want to talk about the ways in which designing an effective social media plan can get the news out about your project into your stakeholders' daily news or social media routines. So how do we go about planning and measuring the value of social media? And I like to call this the 3 V's. So we want to have a vision and talk about what role social media will play in your program. We also want to establish what the value will be. We want to think about what value we will have to measure success. What will success look like for us? And then the last V is vitality. How are we going to keep our presence strong? We're going to go out and start a social media platform. How are we going to sustain it? And so today we'll look at we'll do some experiential learning with case studies. We'll walk through a case study together, and then in a few minutes I'll read another scenario to you and ask you to use the chat box to respond. And then we'll end off with a logic model for social media evaluation that you can take with you to help you make database decisions and having a plan in place. Here's our first example project. So this first case study is for a program called Aspire. Aspire is an undergraduate program available to Appalachian High School seniors who demonstrated financial need, who seek attendance to the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, or to the Chattanooga campus. And although the Aspire program is funded through an NSF STEM award, it has goals similar to NSF Includes because it aims to promote diversity and inclusion of first-generation rural Appalachian college students, which is an underrepresented group in STEM that is often overlooked. So that is why we selected this project. Here is a little background information on the program to give us some context for thinking about their social media plan. Aspire scholars receive financial support for up to 4 years, ongoing advising, undergraduate research experiences, and an opportunity to connect with other Appalachian students while they're here at UTK and on the UTC campus through a living and learning community. Aspire scholars come from a diverse racial and ethnic background and from rural, suburban, and urban communities. The Aspire leadership team suspects that parents of Aspire scholars probably use social media and that if they were able to follow their child's activities and learning at school, they might encourage their child to persevere in school, thus decreasing the dropout rate of first-generation students. They also suspect that using social media to promote Aspire social events might keep students on campus over the weekends. So in other words, what they're saying is that they've noticed that sometimes students will be eager to go home on the weekend and not stay, and they want to keep them involved in what's happening. And they think if they reach out to parents, and these are first-generation college students, they might be able to bring parents into the atmosphere of what happens while at school. So they came up with these ideas to create their vision for social media. They want to encourage students to spend weekends on campus. They want to engage and inform the parents to let them know what wonderful things their students are doing here in the Aspire program. And they want to connect students from both participating campuses, a way for UTC and UTK students to collaborate with each other. They want to share some sample career and research opportunities in STEM broadly out into the community. And they want to encourage a dialogue between these groups. So what we have in place here is what I call the 3V model for social media. Remember, we talked about the 3 V's being the vision, the role social media will play in the program, the value, what we will measure, and vitality, how we'll keep the presence strong on social media. Here's what the Aspire program, we could put in place to measure those kinds of things. We could inform parents about what's happening at school. We could promote the program through shares on news feeds. And we might entice students to stay on campus through the weekend activities. That's our vision. That's how we envision social media happening. How we'll measure the value is we'll look at likes and follows on Facebook and Twitter. So we could use those two platforms. We think those would reach the audience. We'd look at post clips to see from our social media posts what led to increased traffic on the project website, on the Aspire website. And another thing that we would value is we'd value applications. If we got more applications to the Aspire program each year, we would consider that to be a value. And we'd also, a value would be the graduation rate and enrollment in the program might increase because we have this new social aspect. For vitality, how we'll keep the presence strong, team leaders and faculty will make regular practice of taking and sharing photos and events with the school administration. So we'll need people to help take pictures of what's going on and post them. That might be one thing we do to keep it sustained. We might decide to start a parent Facebook group. And this is real. Aspire does have a parent Facebook group where parents can connect with each other and talk about what that experience is like having a student in college. We might even decide that to sustain it, we might occasionally pay to boost posts for school events. So if we have something special coming up where we might want to invite parents and the students to an event, say in their living and learning community, we might decide to spend some money to boost that post to bring in the general public. Another way to sustain the Aspire social media presence might be to do some cross-posting. They're using something called the Remind app to inform students of events. So Remind is a separate app that says, hey, we're having a movie night tonight, and they might decide to use that, and they might cross-post photos of that on Instagram. So that might be a way to do some cross-posting. Okay, now I'm going to throw down a design challenge to you. I'm going to ask you to think about the 3 V's with respect to another case study, which I'll share in a moment. So first, I will ask you to listen while I read an example project. Then imagine that you are leading this project or you're evaluating it and what you might do in terms of vision, value, and vitality. Think about those ideas for 3V and then type those ideas. So next, I will talk to you a little bit about a program called PIPES, and I'll do this in 2 steps. First, I will read you some information about the PIPES program, and then we'll describe the 3V categories again, just as a refresher. and then I'll read a portion of the case study again, and then we'll take some time. So this is the PIPES program. PIPES stands for Possibilities in Post-Secondary Education and Science. This is a 5-year project made possible by a Science Education Partnership Award from the National Institute of Health. But we selected it because it's similar to the NSF Includes program, because its mission is to broaden participation in STEM and to reach marginalized populations in rural and low SES communities. Specifically, PIPES seeks to make a positive difference in East Tennessee by providing opportunities for 10th, 11th, and 12th grade students in 3 rural counties to explore STEM careers. They mean science, technology, engineering, math, and medical science, and to promote college awareness. Currently, graduate students from UTK make weekly visits to 3 area high schools to engage students in a variety of STEM activities. And then they email their reflections to the faculty leadership team. Here is the social media challenge. Hint, hint. These graduate students have expressed a desire to share their reflections with each other using a common sharing mechanism with their peers working in other schools. The PIPES leadership team would like to engage teachers and school administrators in the school they visit in dialogue about what they experience watching the PIPES program in place. And finally, they would like to promote and inform the community of students and parents about what the PIPE program is and what they do. Okay, so I just gave you a lot of information about PIPES. Let's look at the 3 V's again, and then I will share the description, a short description, and give you time to chat. So remember, the first V is vision. So what role will social media play in the program? The second is value. How might we value that as a measure of success? And vitality. What are some ways they could keep that presence strong? Okay, so let's hear the description again. The social media piece, the social media challenge for PIPES. Graduate students have expressed a desire to share their reflections with each other using a common sharing mechanism with their peers working in other schools. Also, the PIPES leadership team would like to engage teachers and school administrators in dialogue about what they experience in the PIPES program. And finally, they would like to promote and inform the community of students and parents about the PIPES program and their activities. So use the chat box to share some ideas you might have for the 3 V's, and we'll discuss some of them.
Okay, and anyone who would like to can just type in the chat box. Here we go. Here we go. Maybe a blog would be the best way to share the reflections.
Sure.
So presumably that's a blog amongst the different groups that would be involved. Under vision, to connect school employees to each other, to connect to prospective, current, and past. To inform the community and create awareness of PIPES activities. So they were all vision ideas.
Right, right. And a blog is a great idea. The first one that mentioned the blog, that's something you can keep private too. So you can be open to the public, or just people have access to the blog, which would work really well for this high school scenario. Also, the one you mentioned about school administrators being able to talk to each other, they're there on the front line, and they have great information about students in the past who have gone through the program and what schools they've gone on to. So it'd be great to have a dialogue between the 2 sides, 3 sides.
And someone mentioned a Facebook group as a possibility here.
Sure, that and that's something that I think would be very helpful to the graduate students as well, along with the blog, that they can Facebook to each other in a private group in the same way Aspire does with the parents.
Under vision, one vision was to help the participating graduate students improve their own skills by learning about what other students experience.
Absolutely.
Here's a suggestion. What about using bots to populate the media platform? Sometimes it is challenging to get enough momentum going.
Yeah, it is hard sometimes to keep, to start the engagement and get it rolling. And one of the things I really love to talk about, and this would be, I think, perfect for a future webinar, is some techniques to get at analytics, go through them, make decisions more data-based decisions. So yes, that's an excellent point.
So here's some comments about Facebook. One is to create a secret or closed group on Facebook for PIPES, for graduate students, employees, administrators, etc., so they can share ideas and discussions amongst themselves, and also create a separate public Facebook page for the general public to follow. So the administrators in this sort of smaller group that's private can choose highlights out of their private discussions to post publicly, since high school students and privacy matters may be an issue here.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yes, and in fact, PIPES does have a public Facebook page that I'm sure they would love if you liked and followed, where they do, and we do have to think about that. We're talking about working with students that are under 18, and so the things that they post on the public PIPES page talk about general activities and some of those things that go to promoting the program. So why don't we take a look at what are some things that PIPES has in place and some things that the graduate students have shared with me. And I think what I share with you will sound a lot like the comments we received in the chat area.
Which we're still getting, by the way.
Okay. So maybe we can return to it. I don't know how much time we have, but I think we'll go ahead and then we can come back to it. So you picked up on some great ideas for vision. So we want to provide a place for graduate students to share reflections. And some people have chatted a blog, a private Facebook place. They use, in real life, they're using a private Google chat to post their reflections right now. They want to promote the program to the community at large by sharing activities to build enthusiasm. And they do right now have a Facebook page with guesses when you said a Facebook page. Something else they'd like to do is they want to be considered a resource place for educators to find STEM and materials. So they want it to be somewhere people can go to, other educators or guidance counselors that can go to and say, bring parents and students information about STEM and materials. We'll talk about increasing understanding in a field in Facebook and a couple more slides. So one of the ways that they are measuring the value, they decide this is what we're going to value. We're going to look at interactions in the comment sections of the grad school group. So whether likes and shares aren't necessarily what they'll value in this particular case. They're going to value the comments that graduate students make. In this particular case, that's where they're going to measure success. The likes and follows to the PIPES and Twitter page are what they're going to follow, what's going to be of value to them. So they want to see people engaged. So in that case, to the PIPES general page, likes and follows are what's going to be important to them. Post clicks on reference material, resource materials. I'm talking about those articles about STEM, and they'll look at traffic that brings to the PIPES website and possibly a YouTube page. So vitality, sustainability. This is where I often see an evaluation where things drop off. People have great ideas about starting a social media platform, but there are some resources that need to be in place for it to be successful. So we could say that we're going to sustain this by asking graduate students to make regular posts on their reflections, either in that private Facebook group or that blog, whatever we decide to use. In this case, they use a shared Google Doc. We might decide that photos of activities will be shared following site visits and posted to the Pipe's main page with permission. But how we might keep that vital and sustained is we might say to the graduate students that are in the schools, take some pictures and we'll make sure we have permissions. But without the pictures, we don't have anything to post. We might make responsibility for informational posts. That could be shared by the leadership team. So those are some ways that we can think about sustainability, and we'll try to get to more chat. So sometimes we've got a social media plan in place, but we don't know what platforms we want to use. So I'm just going to share a brief, little quick summary of 6 of the most popular platforms. These are not all. These are just ones that get the most traction by the general public in the US right now. So the first one on the upper left that I've made a box around is YouTube. And YouTube is, like I said, the second largest search engine after Google. And it has a strong presence for informational short videos. And while I'm mentioning these different platforms, think about connections we could Twitter is our next one in the middle. And Twitter is an instant news source, typically. It has about 271 million active viewers. It has some shortcomings, though. It has a character limit, and some find the high volume of content overwhelming. This is the icon for Instagram. Instagram is primarily a mobile app, and it has more than 300 million active viewers currently. It's for sharing pictures and short videos primarily. Bottom left is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a network to share work experiences and resumes among business professionals typically. It has some additional features available through a paid prescription that they call LinkedIn Premium. Middle, the little ghost. I did a workshop recently and people often ask me, what's the little ghost? The little ghost is a Snapchat, and it's a mobile app for sharing pictures between friends. Right now, it's one of the fastest growing platforms. It has 100 million users as of 2016, and it's growing really quickly. It doesn't store photos automatically, so it doesn't take up memory in your phone. And there are some privacy issues with Snapchat, and I think we'll just continue to see that grow. Facebook. So Facebook is the giant. Facebook is a global social network, and it's used by over 130 billion users at the moment to share photos, videos, links, as well as instant messages. One of the reasons why Facebook continues to be so popular is that some of these other platforms all have features that you can find within Facebook. And remember when I suggested thinking about connections, people often have more than one account that they check regularly. So this graph shows some of what I like to call connectors to daily activity. So this graph says 3/4 of Facebook users and half of Instagram users use their site daily. So when planning your social media platform, it's good to think about these connectors. For example, if we're posting pictures, we may want to consider Facebook and Twitter as connectors. Remember, they don't always match the same type of content, Twitter being much faster, but we could think of them as connectors. This can help you manage resources. Instagram and Facebook can be thought of as connectors. So when we think about the PIPES program, without thinking about them being a under 18 population with permissions, we could share photos to Instagram and to our Facebook page. Okay, so now let's take a look at the percentage of users. So this is similar to the first graph I showed you, but it gives us another look at the percentage of users. And it's important to think about the way things are changing. So this is a graph showing from 2012 to 2016. So you can see Facebook in 2016 was still the king of social media, but it's important to look at the trends over time. Instagram has replaced Twitter in second place. And Twitter has fallen to last place as of 2016. And we see an uptick in use of LinkedIn. So in planning for social media, consider your audiences. And we did that very well in the example. You talked, for example, when some of you chatted about the parents having a private group on Facebook, that's listening to the audience. That might be a good place to start. So think about who do you want to reach with the information and engagement in your program. Remember to make data-based decisions. What platforms will engage your audience and how will you sustain your social media presence? Who's going to be responsible for it? Which brings us to a social media logic model on the next slide. So this is something I share with clients to help them plan, ideally before they start using social media, but it's also good to look at something like this to help you reevaluate a social media plan you may already have in place. So first we'll talk about inputs. Inputs are the things we're going to put into our social media plan to help it be successful. It's important to consider what resources you have, how much time and money do we have to support social media? Who's going to be posting? How often? And how will they get the content? Remember the 3 V's: vision, value, vitality. Are our activities. So what is it that we're going to do? I have another rule of 3s that I like to think about in terms of activities. Y-O-U or you. A third of the time promote yourself. That's the you. A third of the time promote others. Share others. That's the O. That will put your presence on their news feeds and make them aware of you. And you, a third of the time, share understandings. Share information that increases understanding of your program's purpose. For example, if your program teaches ways to infuse cooking in classes, share example recipes or articles about the importance of children learning to prepare healthy meals. Y-O-U, a third of the time promote yourself, a third of the time promote others, and a third of the time promote understanding about your project. Then we have some immediate outcomes. In this case, we're talking about social media, so that's going to be our development. So we hope that immediately we've developed some social media platforms, whatever we've decided we want to use, Facebook or YouTube. And then we have intermediate outcomes. And in this case, that's our reputation. So what do we think, what do we want to decide is important? What do we want to value? Is it likes? Is it follows? Is it comments? And lastly, we have our strategic outcomes. So in our strategic outcomes, we need to think about our social accountability. What do we want to be, our reputation to be? What do we want to be known for? We want to be known for a good place for resources for teaching cooking at school. So, hey, I want to find a recipe for infusing cooking in my curriculum. I'm going to go to this place. Do I want it to be a place for graduate students to connect with each other? Do I want it to be a place for parents to connect to see what their child is doing in college? In the long term, that is our goal, our social accountability for whatever program you're working with. Okay, so let's take a quick revisit of the things that we talked about. Discuss the 3 V's: vision, value, vitality. We did some experiential learning with a couple of case studies, and then we ended off with the logic model and evaluation. Now, Pam has some information to share with you as well.
Well, thank you, Sandra. That was excellent information to get our audience started in thinking about developing and evaluating the role of social media in their broadening participation program. We've shared a lot of information with you in a short time, and at this point, we'd like to give you the opportunity to ask questions and share any comments you may have. And now Lou's going to take it away and share with us some of the questions from the chat window, and please feel free to enter your questions now if you haven't done so yet.
So there's been a large collection of questions here, some of which I've tried to answer very briefly and may not have done a complete job of. So I'm going to ask first. One of these said that, is the 3V model exclusive to pipes, or is this a national model?
It's something I made up.
As, as evaluators, we're constantly making up frameworks that fit evaluation needs. And so the 3V model came out of Sandra's head, and we were pretty impressed with it. And so were some people at a workshop she recently hosted about this. So we decided this would be a good opportunity to spread her model.
That's great, because that sort of comports with what I said. I didn't say it was Sandra's idea. But there's a great follow-on question to this, and it directly relates. Does the 3Vs model take into account the steps to maturing of the community in the social media channel? That is, PIPE students might start out by reading posts and only later in the project begin commenting on other posts as they gain comfort. If you only measure likes and comments, don't you miss the silent readers?
You do. So, like I said, I love to talk about the back end portions of websites. Like I like to talk about the insights. So where you can go in and see how often something's been opened, how long it's been looked at. And I would love to talk about that another time. But yes, that's true. It takes time to build a community. And sometimes when I talk with clients, I say, this is what we think is going to grab onto folks. But we may find when we analyze the back end, the insights, that it isn't really working. I did an evaluation with a school once, an elementary school, and we assumed that the best time to post things was going to be in the evenings. And we were very wrong. It turned out the best time to post things was at about 9 o'clock in the morning, which really surprised us. We were trying to engage parents, and we assumed, well, they're not checking their, for some reason we thought they wouldn't check Facebook so early in the morning, they'd just be getting in the office, but that turned out to be our highest time. So it does take time to build, and that's sometimes hard to communicate to leadership teams and funding agencies. So your data-driven decisions are going to be what help you make the case for changes.
And one of the things that I responded to that was that we really did not mention in the measurement portion of this any aspects of dynamics as a project matures. And that's another way to expand and think about the measure portion of the 3Vs to consider options for how you might measure dynamically changes, and what you might consider as measures of success as you move further along in the project.
Yes.
So part of that is collecting baseline information at the beginning. And when you're experimenting with these different social media platforms, looking at these different metrics as you move forward and seeing what's working and what's not working. And then something that we haven't mentioned is that evaluation of social media is just part of evaluation of a program. And so you don't just have to use clicks and likes and comments and shares. We also do interviews and focus groups and surveys and other types of data collection where we could ask people about their views of the social media platforms that these projects are using.
So there was another question asking about slides that address age of users. We had just that one overview, but the question here was that no young teen I know uses Facebook. Mm-hmm. And targeting the audience's user characteristics is perhaps important for you.
Right. Every user is unique, and every program is unique. And so I often recommend thinking about those connectors. So yes, many young people don't use Facebook, but it could be right for your population. So for example, these graduate students that don't typically use Facebook, they do use Instagram. So if we want to create a dialogue around, let's just say, a picture of students doing an activity and have them reflect on it, Instagram isn't the place for that, but that could be our connector to a place where they could reflect on that information.
There's a separate issue. What about restrictions within institutions on who can post on the, quote, official sites? Lots of institutions have very long review and approval chains. Yes. The content has to go through to get permissions to post anything anywhere.
That's so true. And I will share an experience where, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing this, but I have done an evaluation before where I was the poster. So the content was shared with me and I posted it. That's not really the role of an evaluator, but it was a research experiment for me, and I was able to write about it. So with that agreement, they shared their posts with me. I managed the account. I wouldn't recommend doing that, but yes, that is an issue. And also you have to be very careful about who you allow to make posts. So working in a graduate school program, for example, even if the graduate students are responsible for creating the content, that may not be the person you want posting the information. So that's why you really need to think about that logic model. What resources do we have? Who's going to be responsible at which level?
So there's a question about, has anyone used podcasts, and what was your success?
I've not used podcasts, but I've used YouTube quite a bit and had great success with YouTube. I have not used a podcast myself personally.
We haven't had a program that's used podcasts yet.
So there have been a number of educational projects that have used podcasts, typically for someone walking in the field and narrating as they go along what they're seeing in the field project or an experimental manipulation. I do not know, and then they sort of were looking at how many people listen to the cast to determine whether it was useful, just as people would look at YouTube views. But I don't know that there's been any formal evaluation of them. I'd be surprised if there hasn't been, but I'm not aware of it. So we could, that's a question for us to look up probably. See. Okay. Here's a comment: to capture silent readers, perhaps tracking the number of views of the content as well may help. Posts in Facebook groups, for example, actually track the number of views, and that number of views can be seen by everyone in the group. So that number could be measured over time, and increasing views and posts and the number of comments or likes and posts could also be tracked over time.
Yes, you can use that insights portion, and you can even have people that are able to view the insights but are not able to post. So if you have a graduate student, for example, that you want to have access to the insights to see what's been clicked on, but not give them permission to post, that's allowable to do.
Great. Now, here's another issue that I think is a central issue in much of evaluation. When evaluating our social media, how do we judge what is enough? Should our goal be for our quantities, whether that's likes, follows, or whatever, to basically continually increase, or at some point is it okay if the numbers plateau because that's a solid audience? What's your feelings about that?
So that depends, right? It depends, which is not a good what you might be wanting to hear, but it depends. So yeah, there is let's take, for example, the parent group for the Aspire project, right? So our likes might be limited to the number of parents that have students that go through the Aspire program over time. And so we'll see that level off at a certain point each year. So maybe what's important to us in that group is collaboration, is parents commenting on each other, messaging each other, sharing experiences with each other. So it really depends on the project. That's sometimes hard for sometimes for me to talk about with clients too, is if they only equate likes to productivity, then it's important to explain to them that someone may like your page, but is the comments and shares and feedback, is that what we're going to value? So that's a conversation that I often have with clients using that logic model in 3Bs.
This directly relates to evaluation for tenure and many other things. And, is it the number of publications that matters, or is it the quality of the publication? So it's undoubtedly project dependent. Here's a question. Do you consider the data from the Pew Research Center the best source for understanding which platforms are being used and by whom?
Maybe not the best, but I do like the way that they visualize things. So it's often something that clients or stakeholders are familiar with, so it's a good jumping off point.
So here's a question about data on usage. Is this collected manually, counting Facebook likes on posts, or are the projects using tools such as Facebook Insights? If it's manual, are there shared spreadsheets or other common resources so data might be compared across projects?
So there's different things that you can use. One that I like to use is Hootsuite, which I've used in the past, where you can to assist in not only posting to multiple platforms, but also looking at some of those back-end data. So there are different ways that you can look at it across the board. And sometimes I think a post works well on more than one platform, and then sometimes it needs to be tailored for each one. So Hootsuite's one way that I've used myself personally to manage different sites and see data.
And it's really dependent on, which types of social media platforms you're using, who's collecting the data, where it's going to be stored, how it's going to be shared. So certainly you could use some of these back-end analytics for different platforms, and perhaps put that into a spreadsheet to be analyzed and shared and aggregated and presented across different stakeholder groups. So it's, again, dependent on what you are using and what you are measuring, and then how you're going to take that data so that you can prepare it for presenting to the people who can make the database decisions to improve the program, particularly in reference to social media platforms that you're using.
So here's a comment. We have a podcast. We're up to a couple hundred downloads per episode. And then someone else responded, I'd love to hear more about using podcasting. It's a very specific kind of media. The speed needs to be up, and it is very personality driven. So I can understand the personality part. I'm not sure I understand the comment about speed, but clearly this is a topic that some of the folks on here are very interested in. Here's a comment. I'm a huge fan of social media, particularly for accessible analytical tools, but building a community can take years. Do you think NSF is content to see engagement numbers that are on the low end? For example, a closed group that may only have 15 people and a post that may get 5 likes and 2 comments, which is good relative to the group size, but not something that sounds so amazing in a proposal.
Exactly. That's a good point. So I think the trick is establishing that value piece on the front end. So this is just one way to communicate the reach of your project or how you're communicating, and it does take time to build. So I think it's just one component, but it's clearly stating what value it has to your particular project is just one way to communicate it to NSF.
And with NSF, the answer is always, it depends. So as long as you can make a good argument for why you're starting on the low end and why you're seeing the numbers that you're seeing, then usually that's going to be acceptable.
Is NISER available to hire to help build a social media evaluation plan?
Please contact us. We'll give you our contact information on the last slide, and we'd love to talk with you about that.
Here's a comment. They have a podcast. It's called Sustainable Nano. It's produced by the Center for Sustainable Nanotechnology. And the interview format on a wide range of topics is used, sometimes only vaguely related to center research. So they've found a way to branch out for that at that center. Oh my, here's someone who's making a 3D model for you. For you, I assume that.
Okay, great. I love that. Okay.
Oh, and the speed comment relates to the speed of the talking on podcasts.
Oh.
It is faster than normal speaking, meaning it's for people like me who talk too fast. At least my students say so. Oh, that comment was, it's not of Sandra, it's just for Sandra.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, now, I think I've hit most of the comments that have come in so far.
Okay.
There were some additional comments about back to the 3D portion, but I think we've covered enough of that going on. So
Great. Well, we really appreciate your engagement with this webinar and all of the great questions and comments that you all had. And as promised, I'm going to tell you how to learn more. So if we've piqued your interest today, there are a few ways that you can get more information. You can visit our Includes Conference website here, where we're going to be posting registration links for some upcoming webinars dealing with some different aspects of evaluation in the next months. Please visit the NISER website and follow us on Facebook and Twitter for real-time evaluation information. And if you're so inclined to tweet about today's experience, our Twitter hashtag is #NISEREval. And finally, as promised, here's our contact information. Please do feel free to contact us. Sandra and I are available to answer questions about today's webinar, and the NISER team is available for collaboration on your future STEM education projects. And as a reminder, we'll send an email with a link to our presentation today after we get it processed and ready to send out. And please also look for an evaluation survey about the webinar because we really do value your feedback. And thank you.